All right. Hi, Corey. Welcome to the Animal Tone podcast.
Hello, welcome. Sorry, I messed it up already.
I think that I understand the fear that adding species might dilute the gains made. However, when you add species and you add something like feminism, you start to think about the female body in very different ways. So you start to think about things like menstruation or reproduction very differently. And you realize, I know that you've got a blog entry where you speak about, human women aren't the only ones that menstruate, and we're certainly not the only ones that give birth. We're not the only mammals that give birth. And in fact, how reproduction has been mobilized in agriculture is a feminist issue. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about why, I guess, feminism is really important to having a conversation about speciesism, a word I can never say, and why it is really politically important that we think about feminism.
hmm Yeah, so I think that obviously I'm not the first person to come up with these ideas. This is a long conversation that reaches back all the way to the 1800s. Um, but I was just reading, and I highly recommend this. I was just reading the second version, the second edition, the updated version of Carol Adams and Lori Gruen's edited book called Ecofeminism. And in the second edition, they really go into, in the first chapter, and I assigned this to my students in environmental politics because it was just so good. But they really go into the history of how feminism kind of got sidelined in the animal rights movement and in the late 20th century, and how it kind of continues today. We have actively resistant men who are really worried about the trope of this. It's really interesting in the chapter they trace how this became this trope of the little old lady in tennis shoes, which basically disparages older women, disparages women in the public sphere. And the idea was, we want to respond to this idea that caring about animals is super feminine, and as though that's a bad thing, and woo woo. And so we have all these scholars coming out of the 20th century, especially the Oxford Club, like the Oxford group, like Peter Singer, Richard Ryder, trying to make this a rational sort of agenda. So let's get rid of all that woo woo feminist stuff and make it about rational discourse and reason. But unfortunately, what that's done is had a really chilling effect on the animal rights movement for people who are now, active in the 21st century. There's quite a lot of gender neutrality to the way we do our activism, or active resistance to feminism. And by the way, when I'm saying feminism, it's not just women's issues. Feminism tends to encompass other issues as well, like looking at race, ethnicity, age, class, et cetera, et cetera. Just to give you an example, A.P.P.L.E, bless her, she some years ago wrote a piece for the Vegan Society on her website, which I'm not sure if she still runs it anymore, but it's called Black Vegans Are Cool or something like that. All it did was spotlight Black people doing vegan stuff. It was just straightforward as that. But just the idea that Black people were going to spotlight Blackness in a movement that's supposed to be about animals pissed people off. And the Vegan Society had posted it on their Facebook page, and the onslaught of comments that came underneath it was just truly shocking. And it knocked AF back. AF has been around the block and is ready for that kind of stuff. But to see that kind of visceral response to just saying Black people exist in the vegan movement. So that's what we're dealing with. It's not just like this kind of backlash against feminism. It's also a backlash against, all kinds of multicultural bits. So I think right there, that the fact that people get so upset about it is an indication to kind of dig down in there. Where there's fear, there's power somewhere. So let's uncover that. So what's going on here, I think, is that, well, on the surface, people say, okay, well, this needs to be about animals. We're diluting the message. Okay, that's a very simplistic approach. But I think if we actually dig down into it, what it's doing is actually disrupting hierarchies of power. It's disrupting male entitlement, white entitlement to the public sphere, and getting to speak on behalf of the movement. And so right away, like, we have to think about, if we have a movement that's not actually enacting the type of world we want to live in, how effective is it going to be?